Happy New Year, CyberWire listeners. Rick Howard here. Now that we're in 2023, we're so excited to bring you more ways to stay ahead in the industry with one of the leaders in cybersecurity training and our newest best friend, CyberVista. As a thank you to our listeners, we would like to offer you a free CyberVista practice test as well as 3 free months of CyberWire Pro. 3 free months and a practice test? That's a great deal. Visit thecyberwire.com/promo. That's thecyberwire.com/promo and use the code PROLEARN, all one word. That's PROLEARN to redeem this limited time offer.
This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by Strider Technologies. Strider is the first strategic intelligence tool built to help companies, government agencies, and research institutions protect their innovation and compete in a new era of global strategic competition. With trillions of open-source data points, Strider's technology and intelligence solutions enable you to proactively identify, manage, and respond to state-sponsored intellectual property theft and supply chain risks. Learn how to secure your technology talent and supply chains at striderintel.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems of protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
So RisePro actually came to our attention through sort of an unconventional mean. We were observing a marketplace that sells Stealer logs and noticed that a new Stealer source actually popped up on this market. And it was called RisePro, and none of us had really seen that name before in the past.
That's Marisa Atkinson. She's an analyst at Flashpoint. The research we're discussing today is titled RisePro Stealer and Pay-Per-Install Malware, PrivateLoader. Can you just give us a little bit of background for folks who might not be familiar with this? What exactly are we talking about with these stealers?
Oh, yeah. So stealers are a type of malware with the specific purpose of once they are dropped on a system, they scrape that system for specific information. So this could be crypto wallets. It could be browser autofills, it could be credit card information, system information, browser cookies, and then it will actually exfiltrate that data to a C2 server, usually as a zip file or something akin to that.
Well, let's go through it together and dig in here. Can we go through some of the technical things that you all discovered? What's going on under the hood here?
Yeah. So RisePro was interesting. We actually identified it through open source means. It was being dropped by PrivateLoader, and this was showing up in a few sandbox reports. What was interesting about RisePro was that at first, when we were looking at it, we thought this was just kind of a regular sample of another stealer called Vidar. And Vidar has been around for quite a while now. It was first discovered in 2018 where its source code was actually cracked. And what's unique about Vidar is that it has these DLL dependencies that it's required to run. So I saw these dependencies being dropped by the stealer, but actually within the stealer, even further were these embedded strings that actually would say things like RisePro support, which was very odd. So even though it looked like it was a sample of Vidar, it had these strings identifying it as RisePro, which might not set off any red flags right away, but since we had just seen it as a stealer being attributed to logs on a illicit community marketplace, it stood out even more. And that was kind of when I was like, oh, this might be a new fork of Vidar. And Vidar is a little notorious for being forked. It's actually happened twice in the past. Notably, in 2019, a stealer named Oski came about, which ended up being a fork of Vidar. Also, the most notable aspect of that were those DLL dependencies. And then in 2021, Mars Stealer was a new piece of malware being sold as a service that also ended up being a fork of Vidar.
If we're going with the notion that RisePro may have come from Vidar, what sorts of changes did they make to make it their own?
So there have been very little changes significantly in some of the C2 commands. They added this ping map command, which is just kind of like a beacon out, and some of the URI structure is different. I also want to say that I'm speaking on a kind of behavioral analysis level. We haven't done the in-depth code analysis to really dig into like the structure yet, but just from these behavioral points, we were able to say with a pretty high confidence that this was just another Vidar fork.
I see. Well, let's start from the beginning here. I mean, how would someone find themselves with this on their system?
Yeah. RisePro was most notably being dropped by a downloader called PrivateLoader. Downloaders are a piece of malware that their entire purpose is, once they are on an infected system, to just drop more payloads through downloading them, usually from a C2 server. In this case, it was PrivateLoader. It was first discovered in early 2021. And what was unique about PrivateLoader is, as opposed to just being a standalone downloader malware, it is actually part of a greater service, usually referred to as Pay-Per-Install services. Essentially, the threat actor that develops this loader, they manage a botnet where other threat actors can go to them, pay them a certain amount of money, and the threat actor will actually then drop additional payloads on already infected systems for a price. And that's kind of the idea of a pay-per-install service.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. Imagine a Ferrari losing Le Mans to a 40-year-old Pinto with a broken headlight and 2 flat tires. That pretty much describes the very asymmetrical cybersecurity industry. Money never solved the hacking problem. At CrowdSec, they want to rebalance the odds and make security available to all for free. Their open-source, massively multiplayer firewall analyzes your visitor's behavior and deals with malicious traffic. Once an aggressive IP is identified, it's also shared across all users to ensure everyone's protection. No matter what your business size is, it offers an adapted response to credential stuffing, port scans, password brute forcing, and much more. At CrowdSec, they have each other's backs and make the internet safer together. Want to join the community and protect your IT assets? Visit crowdsec.net to learn more. So if I find myself with this on my system, what happens? What does it go about doing, and how does it go about doing it?
Yeah, so initially what would happen with a loader is they'll usually get onto your system through standard initial infection vectors. So a lot of times that'll be phishing. There will be a document in the phishing email that you download that may have a macro embedded in it. And then if a victim were to actually execute the document and the macro inside of it, then the downloader would be dropped on the system. And dropped in this case refers to the malware actually being embedded within the malicious, let's call it like a Word doc in this case. So there's no need for the macro to reach out to a C2 server or do any sort of networking. It will just extract the downloader from the envelope and then execute it on the system. From there, the downloader will attempt to perform the additional networking activities, such as reaching out to a C2 server, where it will begin pulling payloads. And because this is a pay-per-install service, these payloads will just be dependent on the customers using the PrivateLoader service. In the past, we've seen different payloads being dropped, such as Redline Stealer and Smoke Loader. And then it's also been identified in other open source reporting that Vidar has been dropped. So that's interesting as well, that there's been Vidar and RisePro as well. And then through some of our research, we were able to identify that some RisePro samples were being dropped by PrivateLoader as early as April 2022. And we've also seen some in November and December of 2022 as well.
Now, is RisePro specific in the types of things that it's looking for, or does it try to grab everything, or can the person who's purchased the use of this, can they dial that in?
It can, depending on how granular a customer may want a stealer to be. There's different ways to determine what the stealer will actually be grabbing off the system, usually through like regular expression masks. So if there's specific like file names or keywords that a customer may want exfiltrated off of a system, they could specify that in the build of the malware through the grabber. And then on a more general level, stealers will target browsers and possibly crypto wallets being saved on the system locally. Within the browsers, the stealer is interested in exfiltrating any autofill data. They're interested in taking cookie data specifically is really valuable to threat actors. So they will target the cookie logs of a browser and just dump them and then send them off to a C2.
To what degree are they trying to be stealthy here and hide what they're up to?
In RisePro stealers' case, it didn't look like there was a lot of emphasis on the stealthiness. They were going through the system using registry keys where this data is stored, and they go through and run these processes. Then they will take a screenshot of the desktop. They'll grab files based on those regular expressions that a customer may have specified, compile them all in a zip file, usually in a temp folder, and then exfiltrate them off the system. They'll also, with RisePro's case, there are several URIs that were being used for command and control purposes. So there was things like one of these URLs was get grabbers, and that is those regular expression masks to determine what files need to be exfiltrated off of the system. And so when RisePro would go through an infection, it would be reaching out to the C2 server like 5 to 10 times maybe on a single infected system.
So what are your recommendations then? I mean, based on the information that you all have gathered here, what's the best way for folks to protect themselves?
So in terms of recommendations for protecting yourself against not just RisePro, but also PrivateLoader, it is to be really diligent with being aware of what emails you're looking at, what you're downloading onto your system, because that's your first line of defense. If you're getting a email with, maybe it could be an Excel file, it could be a Word doc, and when you open it, it's asking you to enable macros, maybe take a second look at that. Also, just being diligent with the downloading of software. In the past, PrivateLoader has been disseminated through advertising itself as cracked versions of paid software. And then additionally, being diligent, making sure you have your antivirus turned on. So Windows Defender is actually pretty good at identifying the activity of stealers on a system, because what stealers are looking for is pretty unanimous, even across different builds and versions of what a stealer is. So they'll be tapping the same registry keys, and that's easy to write signatures for antivirus. So making sure you have an antivirus installed on your system and actively monitoring is very important.
Our thanks to Marisa Atkinson from Flashpoint for joining us. The research is titled RisePro Stealer and Pay-Per-Install Malware, PrivateLoader. We'll have a link in the show notes. Dreamport is a mission accelerator that combines state-of-the-art facilities, innovative programs, and imaginative people charged with finding that spark that leads to unparalleled capability. Headquartered in Columbia, Maryland, Dreamport was created through a partnership intermediary agreement with U.S. Cybercom, awarded to Missy in May 2018. For more information, please visit dreamport.tech. Hey everybody, Dave here. We love what we do here at the CyberWire and are proud to be able to provide news and insights that top leaders and decision makers rely on every day. We'd like to give a huge thanks to our many sponsors that make all of this possible and invite your company to join them in reaching over 250,000 unique listeners and 50,000 readers each week. Find out about opportunities to bring your brand and messages to the most influential audience in cybersecurity. Visit thecyberwire.com/sponsorship and join in on the action. The CyberWire's Research Saturday podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karpf, Eliana White, Puru Prakash, Liz Irvin, Rachel Gelfand, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Maria Vermatsis, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Millie Lardy, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Catherine Murphy, Janine Daly, Jim Hoshite, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, Simone Petrella, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week.